Eccles Business Buzz podcast. I'm your host, Frances Johnson, and I'm so glad to have you back for our final episode of the season. Today, we are wrapping up our series of conversations about artificial intelligence by asking the question, what does all of this mean for companies and organizations going forward? What can AI do as companies seek a competitive advantage, and what can it not? Here to help us explore some answers is Jay Barney. Jay is a presidential professor of strategic management and the Pierre Lassonde Chair of Social Entrepreneurship here at the David Eccles School of Business. He previously served as a professor of management and held the Chase Chair for Excellence in Corporate Strategy at the Ohio State University Max M. Fisher College of Business. Jay's research focuses on the relationship between costly-to-copy firm skills and capabilities and sustained competitive advantage. He has also done research on the actions entrepreneurs take to form the opportunities they try to exploit. And recently, Jay published an article entitled, AI Won't Give You a New Sustainable Advantage in the Harvard Business Review. Jay, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Well, Jay, in your Harvard Business Review article, which is what we're going to talk about today, you compare the development of generative AI, which we've been talking about over the past couple episodes, to other technological innovations like the steam engine or the personal computer. To start us off, talk a little bit about how AI is related to these other advances in technology. How are the impacts sort of synonymous?
Well, the impact of Gen AI is still unfolding, so we don't know for sure. But if we were to believe the sort of the general press out there, Gen AI is going to have profound effects on all aspects of business. In my own lifetime, perhaps the best analogy is the personal computer. Show you how old I am. I began my career as a professor in 1980, and we were basically using typewriters to write papers and to communicate. And the PC just transformed my life. I mean, basically, in terms of how I write, how I communicate through email, and those kinds of things. And I think a lot of businesses are that way. I mean, it's inconceivable to try to run a business today without a robust PC network that's connected to the internet. Just inconceivable. And it could be that Gen AI is in that same class. I don't know for sure, but most people seem to think that it is likely to be. We're not arguing that Gen AI is not going to have a profound impact on the way we do business. And in fact, because the impact is going to be so profound, all firms will have to respond to it, and that's not likely to be a source of advantage by itself for any one firm. That's the great irony. Just like if you think you can start a business today or run a business without personal computers and access to the internet, I think most people think you're just confused. So you have to do that. But having a PC and access to the internet, it doesn't actually make you special.
Yeah, I want to get into this because this is the crux of the article, that Gen AI, like a computer, like a steam engine, although we've moved past that technology now, but they are so ubiquitous, they become so much a part of the way that we do business that just because you have it doesn't mean that you have an advantage over your competitors. So to get us started,
marketing people call these kinds of things, they call them order qualifiers, not order winners. That is,
okay.
they qualify you to be in the conversation about making a sale, but they don't actually generate the sale because you're not special. So that's another way of thinking about competitive parity from a marketing point of view.
And it seems like we're also talking about a difference between something that's a disruptor, right, that changes the way that we do business, and something that gives you an advantage. So talk about this idea that you lay out in this article, that Gen AI is a disruptor, like the computer, for example,
Right.
but it doesn't provide a sustainable advantage. Why is that? Walk us through your argument.
Well, the fundamental challenge, of course, is that with AI as a source of sustained competitive advantage, is that it's widely accessible to anyone who has a computer and access to the internet. and new generations of Gen AI will be also widely available. Um, and so just having access to this technology per se doesn't distinguish one firm from another. In the same way that having computers doesn't distinguish one firm from another. And if you can't, if you don't have something that makes you unique in some ways, then it can't be a source of competitive advantage as everyone else has it as well. So it's actually an incredibly simple argument. We tend to get in the Gen AI space in particular, we tend to get all excited about all the cool things that Gen AI can do. And by the way, we're not denying that. It's cool stuff. It's really cool. Got it. But cool stuff is not a source of competitive advantage if everyone else can do it as well. I have an example. I was recently invited to an event where we were honoring a professor, strategic management professor, very well known, who was retiring, and I was asked to give some comments on his career and his relationships to mine. It was a great event, and I went on online and I got a picture of him, and it was just a headshot. It was kind of boring, and so I said, I want to make it kind of cool. So I took the picture and then sent it to my assistant, who then sent it to her son, who was younger, and said, "Can
That's the
you?"
key. That's
That's the
the
key.
key.
That's the key. Can you take this picture and kind of make it cool, like redo it in the style of, say, Andy Warhol? And she said, "Sure." And a day later, I got this picture back, and it had taken this standard headshot and it had transformed it into an Andy Warhol like portrait, and it was way cool. But if I can do that, anyone can do that. And that's not a source of advantage. Okay. But the source of advantage is the creativity to think about doing that, not the ability to do it.
So people remain the competitive advantage. Their creativity, their critical thinking, their problem solving, that is still, as it always has been, the source of competitive advantage.
Well, I'm going to qualify that a little bit. Individuals obviously can be a source of advantage, but the thing about individuals is they can leave your company and go to work for someone else. And if they take all that knowledge and creativity in them, then they are susceptible to leaving, and so not likely to be a source of sustained advantage. So actually, we tend to focus more on organizational processes that include people and teams, and those teams are difficult to move entirely. Not impossible, but difficult to move entirely. And even when you do, you change their context, and so you change how effective they are. So I would say the answer is yeah. People in teams and in processes that are unique and specialized to your organization, yeah, those are the sources of sustained competitive advantage. And if you can use Gen AI to leverage those kinds of resources and capabilities, then now we're great, no problem. But Gen AI by itself is not one of those. It's just software. Software is notoriously difficult to retain as a source of sustained competitive advantage, especially when you have all these companies trying to diffuse it as quickly as possible. So we're quite skeptical about Gen AI per se. But linking up with other resources and capabilities, not a problem.
You also talk in this article, Jay, about how early adopters of something like Gen AI might put themselves at a disadvantage.
Yeah, it's ironic, isn't it? Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that.
Well, so in general, you could say that an early adopter any technology might have some advantage, although if you're too early, you're on what's called the technological bleeding edge, and so that can cause problems. But certainly, we're out of that stage with Gen AI. So it could be that a firm uses Gen AI in a way that other firms have not yet used, that competing firms have not used. That could be a source of temporary competitive advantage. But the irony here is that because Gen AI learns from itself, so every time a company uses Gen AI to make a strategic decision, um, the information about that decision is then incorporated into the data set for the next person who uses Gen AI. Now, Gen AI is just a little bit smarter than the first person. So there's actually a second or third or a fourth mover advantage here rather than a first mover advantage. So um, that doesn't suggest that firms should not do any Gen AI. It actually until a year or 2 years from now, because then things will settle down. What it suggests is you probably need to do it pretty much continuously, because as the system gets smarter and gets better and more complete data sets and more sophisticated human-like analysis, then you want to take advantage of that. So that means you should be engaging in this activity pretty continuously.
There are, though, some exceptions that you use the example of Amazon in your article. And I think this is related to your other research and this idea of things that are costly for other firms to copy.
Right.
If you have a process or a business model that is so large or so monopolistic that other people can't copy it, then there is a scenario where Gen AI could give you a sustained competitive advantage. So walk us through that
Okay,
scenario.
we're gonna back you off of one word there.
Okay.
You said monopolistic, and that's a whole different issue.
That's
Okay, so
another thing.
it's another different thing. For example, you can make an argument, for example, that Amazon is a monopolist in the home delivery retail online market. Or you can say it's just one of 1,000 firms in the retail space. Most definitions of monopoly turn critically on what you define the industry as. So I think, in fact, Amazon has lots of competitors, even has lots of online competitors. So I did some Christmas shopping yesterday. Some I went through Amazon, some I went directly to the company. So that's another form of company. So I don't think they're monopolists, but
But they are huge.
they are huge.
They're huge. Okay.
This is all stuff you don't want to talk about. You can edit this out, but
That's okay.
they're big. But as a percentage of the total retail, it's actually only about 6% or something like that. So
Oh, interesting.
it's not. They're the biggest, but they're. I'm not sure they're even bigger than Walmart at this point. So anyway, I have to look at those data to make sure. But um, and it's not their hugeness that's important. It's not their size that's important. It's their unique business model. That's what's critical. Okay, this is the business model. This again focuses on processes. They have to manage relationship with millions of suppliers online. They have to manage relationships with hundreds of millions of customers around the world. They have to um, uh, uh, get access to these materials, store them in warehouses, deliver them homes. I mean, there's a million different things that they have to do well to accomplish their tasks. It's not unusual. A lot of firms have those kinds of complex things, but theirs is no one else quite has the same business model that Amazon has. So some Walmart gets close. There's a French company called Carrefour that gets close, but still, I think we can make the argument that Amazon's business model is unique. What that means is when Amazon applies Gen AI to analyze its unique business model, it comes up with answers that are only relevant to that model, and therefore those answers are unique. But that source of competitive advantage is not Gen AI per se. It's applying Gen AI to a unique business model. And so that could generate insights that are unique to Amazon, and thus a source of at least a temporary and maybe even a sustained competitive advantage for Amazon. Um, but that again reflects that unique business model they're engaging in. There are a variety of ways that we see that firms can use Gen AI as part of a package of activities they engage in to be a source of sustainable competitive advantage. Another one, for example, is what Gen AI does in some sense is tee up a bunch of possible organizational changes that you might want to make to take advantage of the ideas that Gen AI creates for you. Um, but firms vary in their ability to take advantage of those opportunities. Um, my co-author, who's a consultant at BCG, he talks about companies that have been trying to integrate digital technology for decades and had not made much progress, whereas others have made huge progress and are doing all sorts. So, but that's not digital technology. That's organizational agility. And agility is a socially complex, a cultural kind of dimension of an organization that is costly to imitate, unlike the IT software, which is typically not costly to imitate per se. I work with a company right now that um, we know that it has a real software limitation. We know the software limitation. We even know the solutions that are out there. We have RFPs with several of these companies to help us address these issues. But what we don't have yet is a full-blown organizational process for integrating those software changes into our business practices. We don't have agility, and that's the problem, not the lack of software. It's the agility. Agility is an organizational process that can be a source of competitive advantage, or in this case, competitive disadvantage.
So it comes back to this idea that we're not talking about Gen AI as sort of the savior of all of our problems, but that our advantage um, in companies and organizations in particular comes from these processes that allow us to exploit these new tools in a unique way.
That's right. It's sustainable advantage is what you're looking for. Then you can use Gen AI as part of that process, part of that effort, but it's not going to be the thing. By the way, this is all on the deployment side, uh, deploying a Gen AI. We haven't talked a little at all, and there's not in the article. We don't talk at all about the competitive advantages on the creation of Gen AI side. The people who are
Oh,
using the
okay.
hardware and software to create that happen. That's a completely different analysis. My own guess is some of those people will make a lot of money. There's a
Yeah.
lot of potential here, and certainly, but our article is focused only on the deployment side, not on the creation side, and it basically suggests that firms should think about moderating their investment. Because if you believe, now I'll be careful about this, if you believe that you can use Gen AI to leverage a resource or capability that you already control, that is a source of sustained competitive advantage, then boom, make that investment not a problem. You should be able to generate positive cash flows out of that without much difficulty. However, if it's just Gen AI that you're investing in, and it's not linked to some other critical processes in your organization, you know, I would recommend caution before we overinvest in massive investments in hardware and software to make sure that we are able to use Gen AI because um, I'm less confident without those links to other organizational processes. I'm less confident that that will generate a positive return on your investment, on a firm's investment.
It's this idea, I think Gen AI and other types of AI have fallen into this category of the shiny new toy, right? The shiny new thing. We have to have it to succeed.
To be cool.
Yeah.
Actually, it's interesting. I think it's to be cool. I don't think it's to succeed because unless you define to succeed as being cool. But how can you, I mean? So I mean, let's just be clear. It is very likely that almost all firms will have to invest in Gen AI going forward. Um, Not because it's a shiny new thing, because if you don't do it, you put yourself at a competitive disadvantage. So,
Right.
so I'm not arguing against Gen AI per se. Um, I am arguing against unrealistic expectations about a software being a source of sustained competitive advantage. It's a very difficult thing to pull off, and it only works if it's in the context of these processes that we talked about. So, uh, and I go to these conferences when and these companies stand up and say, "Here's what we use Gen AI to do. Aren't we cool? We use it to do coding, and 90% of our coding is now done automatically, and we use human beings for the last 10%." So it's a very traditional use of what now has become a traditional use of Gen AI. Awesome, wonderful. I'm always confused by this, by the way. I go to these conferences where these IT people and Gen AI people are bragging all about all the cool things they're doing, but all their competitors are in the room, aren't they? Just they just saying, "Here are the things you can imitate that we're doing." I'm very confused by that, but set that aside. I think it's because they want to be cool. They want to be cool among their peers. We're the cool kids. It's very junior high, I know, but still, it has that flavor to it. So yeah, I think it's better to be have a source of sustained competitive advantage. Um, and that may not be that cool, but it's generates a lot of wealth in our societies, on our economy. So that's all.
What are those some uses? I mean, you've said, and we've talked about a couple times now, that at some point, not having Gen AI integrated into your business processes would be like if you were a company still using typewriters.
That's right. That's right.
You will be left behind at some point. So, what are, even if they're not creating this sustained competitive advantage because everyone is kind of doing it, what are the uses that you can think of, the benefits that companies could get from deploying Gen AI?
There's tons actually, and and we don't even begin to know what the full range of implications are going to be. I don't pretend to know. So there are millions of things that Gen AI can do, and they all most of them fall in a couple big buckets, right? One of them is pulling cost out. And by the way, how are you going to pull cost out? By taking human beings out of the process. Now that has huge social implications. This started, by the way, in the 60s with lean manufacturing. We were pulling people out and trying to drop people, using automation and robots, plus supply relationships and all those things. And it's a continuation of that long-term trend of reducing human contact in our business, which, by the way, points to how important that residual human contact is. The stuff that's left over, all this
Gets
other
even
stuff,
more important.
even more important. Exactly right. So that's one. And another one is going to be um, an innovation. I mean, I use an example. This is not my example. Rob Webker, a colleague of mine in our department, this is his example. He had his students in his entrepreneurship class use Gen AI to generate a list of 7 cool toothbrushes to sell, new kinds of toothbrushes. And of course, the problem is that uh, every student does this, and they all generate the same list of 7, which is the point. Okay, so that's source of. But that said, the toothbrushes are kind of cool, not things I would have thought of instantly. Um, and so that kind of use is useful, and I think we should definitely do that. Interestingly enough, you should use Gen AI to generate the list of 7 new kinds of toothbrushes to identify products where you're not going to get a sustained competitive advantage. Not where you're going to, because then you're going to make those toothbrushes, but what stuff that is, what is a deeper substitute for brushing teeth, for example, which is an interesting question. Um, and so, so that kind of innovation is going to be helpful. I don't deny that. Not a source of sustained advantage, but interesting innovation. So those are the 2 big buckets where it's been used so far, um, and that's good stuff. Creates a lot of value. It's just not sustainable competitive advantage.
And I think this is such an interesting point and something that I know departments and degrees across the Eccles School are talking about is if, let's say, 90% of the work is now done by Gen AI, 10%, the 10% left over is done by people, humans, then the work that those humans do becomes that much more critical and that much more important. So, as you think about the students you're teaching, the students we have at the Eccles School, our recent graduates and alums who need to make themselves competitive in that leftover 10%, what do you see as the skills or the capabilities that are really critical for them to have?
Well, I mean, this is not specific to this Gen AI conversation, but it's all about building socially complex relationships among individuals, so they are willing to share, work together, create ideas that only come out of those kinds of those in human processes. And it may be so. For example, go to Gen AI, give us a list of 7 toothbrushes. Great. How do we make those? Ask Gen AI. It'll give you 15 choices on how to get them made, how to distribute Gen AI. But at some point, someone is going to have to make the creative decision about, is there really demand out there? Gen AI doesn't know that because it's not, it can only analyze what is, not what might be. That's going to require another set of skills that maybe even more human in nature. So I think that that the ability to build a team, to realize, to generate a sense of commitment to each other, to the organization, its purpose, to inspire. Those are sources of sustained competitive advantage. I have yet to be inspired by a Gen A experience. Amazed, shocked, amused, entertained, not inspired.
Not inspired. And I love what you say, this idea that Gen AI can only analyze or learn from what has already happened, right? It can't make predictions or deductions based on human interactions. And that's what we're really talking about, is the human sustained competitive
It's
advantage.
mass scale plagiarism, let's just say what it is. But we conducted a little experiment in our department recently. So we teach this case. I won't go into the details, but it's extremely well known. Everyone knows this case. And there are basically three possible answers to the case, all consistent with the case facts. There's the B answer, which is it's this. There's the A minus answer, which is it's this. And then there's the answer that almost no one gets, which is it's this. Okay. And they're all true-ish, right? They all say things. But the third one is really subtle and quite interesting, and really basis of a 4-hour discussion, that one analysis. We put the case online, and we asked Gen AI, why is this company doing so well? Given these facts, why they're doing so well. So which did ChatGPT, which of the three possible analyses did it generate? It generated the B analysis. You know why? Because there are thousands of those analyses online, and it learns from B students, basically. And so it gave us a B. So it's not wrong. It's just not as right as it could be. Now, over time, I expect that Gen AI will get smarter, and more people will get the second answer, and so people will get the A minus. But if everyone gets an A minus, it becomes a B, right? So think about that for a second. And then maybe someday it gets the top answer, but we're not there yet. That's very few human beings get it, and Gen AI is not even close to getting that one. So students ask me, or I've been asked by some students, when should I use Gen AI in answering these cases? And I said, absolutely. Absolutely. Why would you? It's like saying in the old days, should I use an encyclopedia to look up information? I say, no, you have to know it now. It's dumb. So it's just a fancy encyclopedia. It's just really big and really fast, but it's an encyclopedia. Yeah, absolutely. And when it generates a report for you, know that that's a B report, because it's trained on only what has been done, not on what could be done or the creativity that requires the answer. And maybe that's enough for you. That's your call, not my call. But you use Gen AI not to identify the A answers, the sources of sustained competitive advantage. You use it to generate a list of things that are unlikely to be sources of sustained competitive advantage at this point.
It's a
Maybe
starting
that won't always
point,
be the
it
case.
seems like.
It's great, and so yeah, and so we don't. I personally don't care if you want to use Gen AI as a way to start your analysis. That sounds like a reasonable thing to do. It's just not a reasonable way to end your analysis.
What about, as we've talked about these processes that companies have or that they need that really create the sustained competitive advantage, what can companies do, or what should companies do to start developing those processes if they don't have them
No, that's
already?
right. Here's what you need to look for. You need to look for processes that are socially complex, that involve trust and friendship and organizational culture, things that take a long time to develop and are not easy to change. Okay, you need to look for stuff that is what's called path dependent. As a resources and capabilities, processes that you have to have a particular path through time to be able to have these resources and capabilities. You can't go from point 1 to point 10 without having going to point 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it takes time to imitate those things. And the last are complex resources that where there's lots of elements that have to be in place. This is the Amazon story. There's lots of elements that have to be in place, and you don't even know for sure which of those elements are critical. And so you have to do them all, and that complexity of implementation is a third. So that's the kind of organizational processes that are likely to be sources of sustained competitive advantage. So two questions come up. One of them is, what do you do if you have those kinds of processes? Well, you leverage the heck out of them. Use Gen AI and leverage the heck out of them, but you protect the capability. That is essential, because if you fail to protect the capability, then so I always say it can take you decades to build an organizational culture, and a stupid CEO can destroy it in an afternoon.
Yeah,
You
dissipate. It
just
can
can't do that.
dissipate so fast. Yeah.
You cannot put that at risk. So we try to build in our department. We try to build a particular organizational culture that is we confront each other on ideas, but respect each other as people, right? So not a problem. And we have one criteria that trumps every other criteria when it comes to hiring someone. Hire no jerks. Done. I don't care how smart you are. You can be the most brilliant, most productive scholar. If you're a jerk, you'll destroy our culture. So we're not going to do it. So you protect your culture. You nurture those things that are important, and then you leverage them. And in leveraging them, by the way, that helps build them again. So that's actually good news. These are processes that usually get stronger with use, not weaker with use. The second question is, suppose you don't have them. What do? Well, there's an old Chinese proverb, apparently, that says that the best time to plant a tree is 40 years ago. The second best time to plant a tree is now. So start building those capabilities now. And it may take you a few years or some time. It depends a lot on what goes on. We in our recent studies on culture change, we've found that some CEOs and other general managers have figured out how to change organizational cultures in a positive way that happens pretty quickly within a few months. So begins to change in a few months at least. So you can start to build those capabilities, but if you expect to get a sustained competitive advantage out of anything that is not socially complex, path dependent, or has this complex structure to it, you're unlikely to be successful.
And I think this is such a good reminder because Gen AI can seem like a quick fix, right? If we just deploy this, then we can catch up with everyone else. And really, what I hear you saying is you need to take the time to build the processes. It might take extra time, but Gen AI won't get you that advantage. There's no way to sort of cheat building a true sustained competitive advantage.
Yeah, that's right. It takes time. It takes a clear vision on the part of senior team about why this is important. We do these things. We build these relationships, this trust, not because we're nice guys, although that might be true also. We do this because in the economy, because it helps us build organizations that can generate excellence, and that's sustainable. And I think you're probably right. It's flashy, it's cool, Gen AI, and it's a shortcut. And the answer is no, it's
It's
not.
not. It's not the shortcut that we think it might be.
Yeah, it'll be, and this is ironic because it will pull huge costs out of certain processes, and so it looks like it's a shortcut to lower costs. But all those cost savings are imitable and thus not a source of sustained advantage. It's the leftover, the residual human capital, the human relationships that again are so important.
Which is good news for us humans. I feel like there's a lot of hand wringing about AI and how it will just destroy any human job, but that's not the case.
Well, but the thing about it is, there are some people who should be wringing their hands. Okay, I mean, there's no doubt about that.
Sure.
I have a relative who is a plaintiff's attorney, so he sues people who've been hit by cars, stuff like that. And there's a lot of stuff that has to happen, and they have to be able to file the suits correctly and all those things. But most of that feels pretty much like a commodity kind of thing. What I discovered in talking to this person was is there's a skill that this guy has that I had not thought about that is deeply human, which is these people who've been injured or suffered somehow are really uncertain about what's going on. They're nervous, they're scared, and they want to get it done fast as they can. They would really give up a huge payment for a small payment if they get it now. There's a lot, and his job, I think, the critical part of his job is holding their hand, metaphorically, holding their hand and helping them through the process. Helping this, yes, I understand your concerns. I get that. Let me tell you, blah 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 blah. And this guy is so good at this. That's what he does for a living. Now, oh yeah, he also files in the court and argues the cases and does all those things. Some of that is going to be deeply idiosyncratic as well. So that's also potential sources of competitive advantage. But this relationship creating and building and mending, I you know I don't think that's a Gen AI thing anytime in the near future. I think it's a deeply human process. So yeah, I think that's where the action is long term.
Well, Jay, we've talked about some of the ways that companies are using Gen AI and they can use Gen AI in the future. From your personal perspective, what is a potential AI development or innovation that you have your eye on or that you would like to see that you're excited about?
So that's a great question, and I'm going to say I don't know. I don't pretend to be an expert on the technology per se. I'm an expert on the competitive implications of the technology. Those are different things. And so I let the Gen AI people worry about that. And trust me, they're all like so excited and they can hardly stand themselves, you know. Good for them. I will. It's fun. I mean, I talk to these people and they're very smart, and I have great respect for them. But they're not. They don't think of this in strategic competitive terms. Typically, they think of it in technological terms. I mentioned an example. This occurred at a Super Bowl party last year. A good friend of mine, three-time successful entrepreneur, smart guy, and he said, "You can't tell me that Google doesn't have an advantage in using Gen AI because it has 10 million data points or some number, 10 billion data points, compared to a firm that has a much smaller sample data set." And I said, "It's not obvious to me that's true at all." And he was, "How can that? I mean, 10 billion versus a million. I mean, how can that not be an advantage for Google?" And the answer is, have you ever heard of sampling theory? I mean, what do we? We take small samples represent large populations. We don't need 10 billion. We need a representative sample of the 10 billion. A much smaller data set's easier to deal with. I believe the AI people now are trying to figure out what's the minimum size of data they need to have to be able to generalize to a population. Well, sampling theory, a statistical problem. We've had that around for a long time. So, so, um, I let the technology people figure out all the cool things they can do. I'll be at least. I am personally very comfortable with technology from the late 20th century. That's where I feel best. So I'm not a technology guy. I'm a strategy guy, and I can say a lot more about that.
Well, this has been so interesting and I think such a great perspective to maybe take a step back and just think of AI in the context in a bigger context, right?
We wanted the title of the paper, Gen AI, take a chill pill, but they didn't go for it.
Well, Jay, I appreciate so much you sharing your expertise and your insights with us. Thanks for being here today.
No problem. Talk to you later.
And thank you for tuning into this season of the Eccles Business Buzz podcast. We'll be taking a short break and then we'll be back in the spring with a brand new season. We'll be taking an in-depth look at the new strategic priorities of the Eccles School, and we'll be checking back in with Dean Kurt Dirks to hear how his first year on the job has been. It will be another season of insightful and informative conversations, so make sure you're subscribed to Eccles Business Buzz wherever you listen to podcasts. In the meantime, you can also follow us on Instagram at Eccles Alumni to stay up to date with all the events and other things going on in your Eccles Alumni Network. Until next season. Eccles Business Buzz is a production of the David Eccles School of Business and is produced by University FM.